There's something deeply unsettling about the idea of being watched, especially in the one place you should feel safest, your home. But what if the eyes watching you weren't from the shadows or the woods, but from just a few feet away? These are 3 disturbing, true horror stories about neighbors, ordinary people living just next door, who cross the line from curious to creepy and from creepy to terrifying. Story 1 by Melissa R. I moved into my first apartment when I was 22. It was nothing fancy, just a small studio on the 3rd floor of a building in Chicago, tucked down an older side street near Lakeview. Rent was cheap, which in hindsight should have been a red flag. But at the time, I was just excited to have my own space. The building was a U-shape with a narrow alley between its wings. My window faced another row of apartments directly across the way, probably 20 or 30 feet between us. I kept my blinds open during the day for light, but I always made sure to close them at night. At least, I thought I did. About 2 weeks in, I noticed something strange. I was brushing my teeth one night and happened to glance out the window. There was a light on in the apartment directly across the alley from mine, and a man was standing there. Not just standing, staring. At me. He didn't move, just stood, dead still in the dark, backlit by a lamp. I quickly ducked out of view and pulled my blinds shut, heart hammering. I tried to convince myself it was just a weird moment. Maybe he wasn't staring. Maybe he was just zoned out. The next night I looked again. He was there. Same position, same vacant stare. It became a pattern. Every few nights when my lights were on and I hadn't drawn my blinds yet, I'd catch him, motionless, watching. I started using blackout curtains, but it didn't help the dread. I felt him, felt his presence, like a pressure through the glass. Then came the night I found the note. I had gone to the grocery store and came back to find an envelope slipped under my door. No postage, no name. Just my apartment number written in neat, blocky letters. Inside was a single photo, a Polaroid, of me, sleeping. I dropped it and immediately started crying. The photo was taken from above, like from a higher angle, looking down at me. My mouth was slightly open and my blanket was pulled to my chest. It looked recent. My hair, my pajamas, everything. It was how I'd gone to bed the night before. I called the building manager. He said there was no one with access to my unit but me, and he hadn't seen anyone suspicious. I filed a police report, but there wasn't much they could do. No fingerprints, no cameras in the hallway. That night, I didn't sleep. I triple-locked the door, put furniture against it, slept with a kitchen knife under my pillow. At 3:12 a.m., I woke up suddenly. No noise, no dream, just that feeling. The kind where something's wrong and your body knows before your brain does. I looked toward the window. The blackout curtain was slightly open, just an inch. And in that inch, I saw the silhouette, the man, standing in the same spot across the alley. But this time, he wasn't inside his apartment. He was on the fire escape, my fire escape. I screamed and grabbed my phone, called 911. While I was on the phone, I saw him start to move, slowly, methodically, climbing down the metal ladder to the floor below. The police showed up within minutes, but he was already gone. They combed the area but didn't find him. What they did find, though, was worse. A hole, drilled into the wall behind my bed. It was behind a patch of wallpaper, so I never noticed it. But it was angled perfectly, toward my face, from the apartment next door. Not across the alley, next door. Turns out, the man across the alley was a red herring. The real threat had been someone on my floor. Someone who could hear me move, hear me sleep, maybe even sneak in when I wasn't home. I moved out the next day. The police later discovered the guy had lived in the unit next to mine for 3 months under a fake name. After he fled, they found his apartment empty, except for a mattress, a box of Polaroids, and a notebook. In that notebook, my name was written over 100 times, along with the words, "She sleeps like a doll. So still, so quiet." One day, I'll introduce myself. If you're enjoying these creepy stories so far, make sure to like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe for more. If you have a terrifying experience of your own, send it to the email in the description below. Story 2 by Jordan P. Back in 2018, I lived with my girlfriend Natalie in a duplex house on the outskirts of Salem, Oregon. It was the kind of place that seemed almost too quiet at night, where you could hear a pin drop through the walls and even your neighbor's microwave beep if you listened close enough. We had the bottom unit, and an older man named Dennis lived above us. He was polite but odd, always staring too long and never quite blinking when you talked to him. We joked that he seemed like the kind of guy who didn't sleep, and the longer we lived there, the more that started to feel less like a joke. At first, it was small things. We'd hear footsteps above us late at night, like 3 or 4 a.m. But they weren't normal footsteps. They were slow, shuffling, almost like pacing. It would go on for hours sometimes. When I brought it up to Dennis, he just smiled and said, "Sometimes the dreams keep me walking." Okay, weird, but not a crime. Then Natalie started noticing things. One night while brushing her teeth, she swore she saw movement in the hallway mirror behind her, like someone stepped just barely out of view around the corner. I told her it was probably just the reflection from a car driving by the window, but then she started waking up in the middle of the night. Not because of dreams, because of a feeling, like someone was standing over the bed, watching her. She told me this one morning, and I laughed it off. "If someone was in here, I think we'd know," I said. Then, 2 nights later, I proved myself wrong. It was around 2:45 a.m. I'd woken up to pee. As I stepped into the hallway, I noticed the closet door was cracked open. That was strange because I always kept it shut. The air was cold, colder than it should have been, like refrigerator cold. I reached for the closet handle and pulled it fully open. Nothing, just coats, a few boxes. I even joked to myself, "Relax, Jordan, you're not in a horror movie." But just as I turned to walk back to bed, I heard something above me. A creak, then another, from the attic entrance. Now, our unit didn't have attic access, but there was a panel in the hallway ceiling that led to a small crawl space above both units. I grabbed a step stool and slowly opened it. The ladder came down with a groan. I shined my phone's flashlight up there. All I saw at first was dust, old insulation, cobwebs, and then movement in the far corner. There was someone up there. I froze. My light trembled as I tried to steady my phone. I focused it on the shadow. It was Dennis. He was lying flat on his stomach, tucked into a corner, his pale face barely visible in the beam of my light. His eyes were open, unblinking, just staring down at me. I jumped back so fast I nearly knocked the ladder over. I slammed the attic hatch shut and dragged the kitchen table underneath it, then called the cops. They showed up 10 minutes later. By then, Dennis was gone, but what they found in the attic made me feel sick. There were fast food wrappers, empty water bottles, a yellowed notebook with times and dates and details. Lights off at 10:12, breathing slows at 11 ac. She sleeps on her side. He snores after midnight. Monday, Jordan woke up twice. I stayed still. They don't know. He had been up there for at least 2 weeks, maybe longer, watching us sleep through the ventilation grates, listening to us breathe. The landlord said Dennis hadn't paid rent in 2 months. His unit was empty. A single mattress on the floor and a rusted folding chair facing the window. No one saw him leave. They never caught him. For months after, I couldn't sleep without checking every closet, every corner, and especially that attic hatch. Even now, sometimes I wake up and feel it again. That presence. Like someone's just waiting, watching. Story 3 by Melissa R. This happened in 2021 when I moved into a small studio apartment in Santa Clara, California. I was 27, had just started my first tech job, and was eager to live on my own for the first time. The complex was decent, nothing fancy but clean and quiet. My unit was on the 2nd floor and overlooked a small courtyard with a fountain in the middle. Directly across from me was another building, and on the second floor, there was one window I could see clearly from my bed. That window became a part of my life in ways I couldn't have imagined. It started with the feeling of being watched. I know how that sounds. Everyone gets paranoid sometimes, especially when they live alone. But this was different. It wasn't just a feeling. It was like I could sense where the eyes were. Every time I turned off my light at night and lay down to sleep, my eyes would drift to that one window across the courtyard. At first, it was dark, just a window like any other. But one night, there was someone there, a silhouette, just standing, motionless, behind the glass. I couldn't make out a face, just a figure, still, watching. I sat up, confused. Maybe someone was just standing in their apartment. It was probably nothing, but the next night they were there again, and the next. They never moved, never turned off the light, just stood there, same time, every night, somewhere between 11:02 p.m. and 2:02 a.m. Eventually, I started keeping my blinds shut, but that just made me more anxious. I hated not knowing if he was there, so I opened them again. Sometimes I'd even stare back, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. One night, I got brave and took a photo with my phone, zoomed all the way in. The figure wasn't behind the window. He was pressed against it. I could make out the smudge of his forehead on the glass and what looked like fog from his breath. His eyes were wide open, his mouth slightly open too, like he was in some kind of trance. Or maybe smiling. I showed it to my building manager the next morning. She said the unit across from mine was supposed to be vacant. Had been for weeks. That's when I started to panic. I called the police. When they checked the apartment, it was empty. No furniture, no bed, just bare floors and a few old newspapers scattered near the window. They said no one was there. But I know what I saw. I know he was real. I started sleeping with the lights on. I bought blackout curtains and didn't look out the window at night anymore. I didn't care if he was still there. I just didn't want to know. But the worst part? It didn't end there. About a week after the police visit, I noticed something new. Smudges on my own window, on the outside, as if someone had been standing on the tiny fire escape just outside my room. I lived on the second floor, and that fire escape had a locked gate from below. There was no easy way to climb it, not unless you were trying. I bought a camera and pointed it at my window. I checked the footage every morning, and on the third night, I saw him, the same man, same posture, standing completely still on my fire escape at 2:14 a.m. He didn't knock, didn't tap, just stared. Then, he smiled and left. That was enough. I packed everything the next day and moved back in with my sister for a few months. To this day, I don't know who he was or how he got into that apartment across from mine. I don't know why he chose to watch me, or how long it had been going on before I noticed. All I know is, he's still out there, and somewhere, he's probably watching someone else sleep. Outro. Sometimes we worry about things that go bump in the night. Doors creaking, shadows moving, eerie sounds in the distance. But sometimes the scariest thing is what doesn't make a sound at all. The quiet stare from a window across the courtyard. The creak above your ceiling that isn't the pipes. The neighbor who always seemed a little too interested in your schedule. Because when the watching starts, you never really know when it stops. Sleep tight.